I'm always up for a challenge when it comes to fishing, and a challenge for me today is to come to a new fishery, which is Float Fish Farm on the outskirts of Peterborough. I've heard some great things about this fishery, and walking around the lakes with Scott and Ken this morning from the shop on the fishery on site, I can see why. There's some big shadows just lurking under the water. Now, when I see fish like that, it really does get my juices going. And when they're that shallow in a lake that's like this one that I'm on today, which is 8 foot deep, it only says one thing for me, and that's to get these out. And if nothing else, I'm definitely expecting a busy day. So where do we start? There's been so many videos about pellet waggler fishing over the years, and I've been pellet waggler fishing for probably best part of 20 years now, and it's really evolved. So what I'm going to do first is the starting point. Everything else we're going to go through as the day goes on. But the first thing is we're looking to catch these fish shallow. We're looking in the upper layers. This lake's about, like I said, it's about 8 foot deep. So I'm looking at catching in the top metre, potentially even shallower. But the way you fish the pellet waggler is you've got to constantly feed. You've got to be dripping in 3, 4, 5 pellets, 8mm pellets constantly. The minute they drop below a metre, they're almost dead, because I'm not looking at fishing on the bottom. Today's session is all about one method. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start by feeding. Now you do need a lot of catapults for this, which I've actually got, and I'll show you. Got plenty of catapults, because the last thing we want for today's session is elastics breaking, having nothing to be able to feed. So come prepared, or at least come with an elastic repair kit. But I like to have them all ready. I'm just like that, but I always repair them at home if I do break them. So what I do is, as you can see, I don't use a rod rest. And one of those, this is very fast fishing, so you need the rod in your hand at all times, and usually the catapult as well. And what I do is, I always have my pellet on the side. To start the session, I've got to build the swim, I've got to draw fish. I've basically got to start trickling pellets in. I don't want to draw too many fish that I start foul hooking them, getting line bites. I just want to be drawing 1 or 2 fish at a time, get proper bite, hook fish properly. I don't want to be foul hooking them, getting those fish in, then repeat the process. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start the session now by basically holding the catapult in my hand, picking up 3 or 4 pellets. I always start with a few more, so it could be 3 or 4 pellets. There's 4 gone in with a pinch, and then I'm looking at feeding those. Now when I say distance, I don't want to be overstretching myself. Again, it's back to this breaking catapults, trying to outdistance everybody. It's better to group your pellet in a nice area that's comfortable for you. And obviously for today's session, with a little bit of wind that's swirling around a bit, I don't want to try and go too far in case it does switch. So what I'm going to do, I can control everything better at around 22 to 25 metres. But I'm going to have a trial feed to start with. And that was easy, 22-ish metres. So I know if I need to chase those fish out further, I can fire those out to 25, 26 metres. What happens when you fish this way shallow is the fish do tend to back off under pressure, especially on heavily fished waters like here at Float Fish Farm. So I need to give those fish some space to move to. I don't want to be putting pellets out 25, 26 metres, and then I'm going to struggle to fish comfortably with the right presentation at 28 metres for argument's sake, or even further with a bigger float. So make it easy for yourself. So the first thing I do, fire a few pellets out, get the feel for it, then repeat the process, then let's start fishing. And that one was about 3 seconds. And that's straight in. I don't know if you can hear on the camera, but you've got to have your drag set, because these fish do rip off, because they're taking it so quickly in amongst the feed, and the minute you hook them, you don't want to get broken, especially when you lift into them, because you could be lifting into those fish literally as they're pulling away from you. So have that drag set. You can move it, tweak it as you play them. And what you don't want to do is have those fish screaming off and that bail arm wrapping your knuckles. But that's a nice start after 4 casts. Same 4 casts, I did a bit of feeding before, as you saw on the lens, but that's how important it is, just to give them fish some confidence. Don't go straight in amongst them, because these fisheries are heavily fished and full of fish, full of very fit, healthy fish. And this fish wants to go for the near side vegetation. Nice fish to start off with. And like I said, it is windy, so the conditions, especially keeping my line straight so I've got the right presentation, That's a nice carp to start the session. I was told the fish in this lake are very fit and they will scrap, even the 4 or 5 pounders, and this one's probably best part of that. And they're not wrong. It's a lovely way of fishing, and it's a very busy way. I'm almost tired already. We ain't got one in the net yet. Nice mirror. There you go. Always make sure you throw the hook aside. I'm going to put this one back, but I'll just show you because it's our first fish. Nice mirror to start the session. Let's get him back. We don't need to put him in the net. Nice to get one about 3 or 4 times the size of that. Let's put him back gently. So for today's session, it's incredibly easy in the sense of bait, and there's no confusion whatsoever. It's just purely 8mm pellets today. There's a little bit of wind on the lake, so I'm just going to show you what pellets I use, and I'm just going to get them ready in the tubs now. I only use 2 types of 8mm. If the fishery allows you to use your own pellets, then I bring my own 8mm. I use the Dynamite Bait Catter pellets. These are brilliant. They're all uniform in size. They're not too much oil in them, so you don't find they sink too quickly. They just act very natural, as a pellet should. So I'm just going to put some of those in the tub, ready for today's session. Always put plenty in because, you know, I don't like to be scraping around the tub at the end of the day. And it saves me getting off my bark, scraping around looking for more pellets. So that's the 8mm catty pellets already. Like I said, they're nice uniform size. They're not too heavy, but they do catapult really well. I've also brought some F1 Sweet 8mm pellets from Dynamite Bait as well. And these are very good as a change bait. They're very yellow in colour. Normally I like a darkish pellet for shallow fishing. But what I like about these is they're just something different. And they do sink a little bit different to the standard ones because they've got some F1 Sweet in them also. So I'm going to try those as a change bait, but more for the hook than to feed, just to see now and again if I can just trick a carp into, you know, they're getting used to feeding on them and getting caught on them. It's just a change bait. So that's the bait for today's session. What I'm going to do now, I've just put the pellet waggler down in front of me, just flicked it out in front of me so I'm ready to cast. I'm just going to put a few pellets straight out. I've gone 3 pellets and another 3. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to swing it back out and go straight in past them. Just trap it. Always make sure you feather the line. Get that pellet going past. There you go. See the difference that makes? I know a lot of anglers just put, you know, just cast out, then fire the pellet or fire 3. But when I've just caught a fish, it causes a bit of disturbance. So what I've done is I've just found over the past, through past experiences, that if you just feed 3, sometimes, yeah, that's all you need to feed, but just 3 and another 3, making that extra noise, because those pellets do sink quite quickly. You just find it gives you a quicker response to catching your next fish. And you don't have to cast in. So rather than make the disturbance first, let the pellets make the disturbance, and then obviously feather that in over the top, and you'll coax another fish in like I have just done. They do like these reeds inside. You can probably hear the importance of the drag. I'll probably tighten it when it gets close to the reeds because I don't want them pulling me into it. You can see that rod's really working, and it's not a big fish, but they are very fit fish, as I was warned. So with that in mind, I did set up accordingly with certainly with my hook pattern, hook length, strength. But what was nice is the way they're responding to the feed and the way I'm feeding and the timing of casting. It's a lovely mirror. Nice fish. Pristine condition. Like I said, not particularly big fish. Just throw that out the way. But a very nice looking fish all the same. Nice mirror. Let's get him back. Well, it really is going to plan. It's very, very steady. There's obviously a lot of fish in this lake. Conditions certainly aren't perfect for pellet waggler fishing. It's hard not to create a bow in the line, but with only a 15-20 second window of catching these fish, it's probably not too bad as long as you cast that float quite hard, keep that line straight, get that pellet flying behind the float so everything goes tight and in, then it's acting natural. After all, once that's settled, it's almost dead. I don't need to leave that pellet hanging. There is days when you can sink the line, leave the pellet hanging with a longer waggler. There was one in the intro, you know, where I showed you the floats I used, but there's that many fish in here. I can just fish a nice stealthy approach at the back of the feed and then just catch these fish at will, really. There you go, another nice small mirror. A small one, about £3. Just throw that out the way. And I'm going to feed 4 pellets. And I'm going to cast it, get a pellet on and cast into them. Just let them group back up. It's very busy and steady fishing this, but there's no rush. You know, there's the one thing about this is no rush. It's a very an exciting way of fishing. It's a very busy way of fishing. And in a second, important, trap that line, trap that float, and make sure everything lays straight. And now the line's just starting to bow, but 15-20 seconds I shouldn't have to worry, because if I haven't had a bite by then, like that, I can always just reel in and repeat the process, and that's the time you're going to get your bites anyway. If you look at all the bites I've had so far, and this is what, 6th, 7th carp now, in no time, all the bites have come literally within, I would say, 10 seconds. I don't even think we've gone past 10 seconds. What I'll do, because that is a smaller carp and it has gone up the lake a little bit, is I'm just going to fire out 4 pellets. And what that's going to do, that's ready for the next fish now. And I will do that if this gives me a little bit of trouble, because they do fight hard in here. And especially if you're in a match. I know we're not in a match today, but it is getting in that rhythm, and it's important with this kind of fishing, is you can't be lazy. And it is lining up that next fish. It's like a snooker player lining up his next shot. You know, when fish are coming within 10 seconds, they're feeding high in the water. There we go. Another one in the net. Certainly doesn't take long to amass a weight of these. And that's a good £5 fish. Nice mirror carp. Put him straight back. Swing it out, straight back in. Feather that line hard, because that is windy, so I want that all to straighten out, pellet to fly behind. One thing you find when the pellet, the float I'm using is quite light. It's only 4 gram, but that's ideal for that distance today. Even in that wind, that's ideal. Oh, missed that one. So I'm going to feed, but what I'm trying to explain is I want that bait on the hook to act as natural as possible. So it's just casting out in that wind, trapping it. That pellet, that's a lovely cast, that one. So that should be a bite. I'm convinced that'll be a bite on this cast. There you go, right on cue. You could see, you know, it's hard to get the perfect cast when it's windy, but the wind just lulled for that one. It was a really nice lay, if you like. The rig laid out nice, the waggler, followed by the pellet. The waggler doesn't dive anyway, because it's only 4 grams, so it won't dive deep, so it won't pull the pellet down. And I've lost that one. But it just goes to prove that, you know, that kind of process is important. So I'm going to do it again, 3 pellets this time, 22, 23 metres, cast straight in over the back of them, trap the line. Another nice cast that was. There's not much slack to bring. You don't want to be moving that float. That float's got to, there we go. And I've lost that one as well. But that seemed like a smaller fish. I don't know if there's any F1s in here or not, but they felt sort of F1 size fish. But anyway, 4 pellets. Swing the rig out, cast it out, trap it, feathered, straight round, drag set. I've gone off the back of the feed a little bit. There we go. One thing for sure, there's a lot of fish in here. But that's working, you know, even though there's a lot of fish, you can easily get carried away, you know, thinking you've got to feed more, and you just don't. It feels quite a nice fish, this one as well. And what I'm going to do, because it caused a lot of disturbance and I saw a fish, now that swam out my swim, and that's the nice thing also about fishing off the drag, is I'm just going to put 4 pellets in my pouch. I'm just going to balance that, and that's why you've got to always hold the rod, fire those pellets out, and now I'm letting them group again, ready for the next one. And that's why, even though I'm catching these fish literally one every cast, the beauty of it is I'm now ready to go straight back in and hook the next fish. You know, I'm not waiting to build the swim up to catch the next fish. But the beauty of switching wagglers, like going to this one instead of using, say, what I call a conventional pellet waggler, there's incredible, well, when I say incredible, there's just no disturbance whatsoever. You know, there's no crashing of the float, which is going to make the pellet seem unnatural. So, you know, gone are the days of using those great big pellet wagglers and kind of, you know, feeding a lot of bait. It's all about a more stealth approach to just line up that next fish, which is what we've done. Let's try and scoop him quickly. Yeah, there you go. That is a nice mirror. Biggest one of the day so far. Oh, good 8 pound. Cracker, isn't he? We'll get him in the keep net because that's a nice fish that is. Hopefully we'll get one bigger, but they're a lovely size anyway. More than happy with that. Oh, another bite missed. Just before that I fire looked a fish as well. So what I'm going to do now, I've had a nice run of about 10-11 fish. As you can see, I'm fishing 1 metre deep to start with, just to catch, just to give them fish a bit of confidence, keep the float away from the bait. But I think now is the time to take a little bit of depth off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just slide the float stops down about 8 to 10 inches. So I'm going to be fishing about 2.5 foot deep, which is about, in the summer, this time of year, is about the normal depth, you know, that I'd expect to catch on, especially once the session gets going. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to fire 3 pellets out. Let's just see what happens, whether I get a proper bite on that. It's about 2.5 foot deep. Feathered straight in. Missed bite, but the good thing is it was a bite. So we're just going to put another pellet on and then repeat the process. So what I've done is I went to about 2.5 foot, missed another bite, straight back in. It says no, I've got to shallow up even more than that. So even though you think you're fishing shallow at 2.5 foot and it's 8 foot deep out there, those fish have come up even shallower. So I've actually gone to about 18 inches. I took another foot off and straight in. You know what I'm going to do, because they are so shallow, I'm just going to feed another 4 pellets while I've got that fish on. So it's primed for the next one. Oh, they do fight in here. They do fight. Just get a bit of that drag on, just to tire them quicker. I'd say he's ready for the net now. Is he? Is he? Is he? No. In the net, another nice mirror. There's 2 ways of putting a pellet, an 8mm pellet through a band, or a pellet through a band. There's a bander, and which you can just stretch the band open, pop the pellet in, pull the pellet out and it's on. Or my preferred way, which is much quicker, is to just take the pellet, put it halfway down the barrel, put your nail on the actual band, as you can see, and just stretch it over the top like so, and then just roll it to the middle, and you've got a perfectly banded pellet. Just going to go to a point, a bit of a bone of contention with a lot of anglers is should you try and get 2 bites of the cherry. Cast out just past the feed, reeling. If you don't get a bite initially, like I said, you get that short window, try to grab a second window by reeling into those pellets. I've never followed that because I've never really had it work. You know, you react to how it's fishing, you react to basically how you feed those pellets and how natural those pellets should look, to what you're feeding, to actually what's on the hook and how it's falling through the water. So I've already explained it, and I'm going to explain it again with this part. When I cast this float out, it's most important to feather that float down. It's only not do I want to make the crash. Gone are the days of the fish coming to a great big splash in the water. What they're coming to now is the noise of the pellet. So what I'm trying to do is make almost like a double plop, if you like. These weighted wagglers these days, they've got that kind of pellet size weight in them, as you can see, and then you've got your pellet on the hook. So what I'm looking to do is, that's the first plop, and the second is as that pellet lands straight behind. So I'm trying to hold a tight line to that pellet. Holding that tight line holds that pellet up in the water. A, the float doesn't go crashing deep and bring the pellet down, and secondly, it holds that tight. And that pellet then is going to react naturally to the pellet I'm feeding. And then you're more likely to get bites, and proper bites too, like I have done so far today. So that's important. Back to the twitching part. If I'm twitching that pellet, all I'm doing is dragging it off course. I'm either dragging it through feeding fish, which I don't want to do. I don't want to be spooking them. The idea is that double plop sound I'm looking for, and that natural fall. If I'm just reeling that pellet in, unless I'm reeling it quickly, which would be probably too quick to bring the pellet that high up to where those fish are anyway, it would probably come too far back, then I just don't see the point of it. It's just something that's never worked for me personally. And so far today, on a venue I've never fished before, how I'm reading this is, the minute I'm casting in, I'm literally catching the minute that flow hits the water, or within 20 seconds. I've done the count in my head, and most of the fish, I would say, are coming within 10 seconds of that float hits in the water. Don't see the point in twitching it. I'd sooner feed, recast. I think that's far more effective over the period of your competition or your day's fishing than it would be if you were to just keep twitching, spook fish. You're out of your habit of feeding, and that's what I think is an important point, is to get that bait acting as natural as those ones that I've just fed, as I'm going to show you now. And I'm going to cast this in. The process is cast out, feather hard, bail arm on. You haven't even got time, and look at that, straight in. You haven't even got time to rely on the reel to turn the bail arm. You don't want to bring any line forward. You don't want to move that float. So why do I want to twitch it? I don't. So that's my take on it. And so far today, and in years of fishing this method, which, like I said, is over 20 years, I don't see why I need to move that pellet out of where those fish are feeding, or certainly drag a float through them. But this was right on cue, so I think it's good. And you can see another little point about the importance of the drag on the reel. Keep the anti-reverse on, rely on the drag. You know, you can alter that as the fish is swimming. It's probably a little bit loose now, it's coming closer. And if it is like this one and it's kicked out the swim quite hard, keep the bend in the rod, grab some pellets, feed again. That's 3-4 pellets. You know, I can do that in intervals as I'm playing the fish. There's no danger. You know, the tackle's strong enough, the rod's, you know, got a nice bend in it, because these Pellet Waggler rods, they're fantastic for, you know, bending right the way through, a nice progressive action, which is great for casting the float, and it's great for playing fish as well. And it's handy when you want to feed in the swim at the time you're playing the fish. So, you know, so again, that's probably about 10 meters out. So I'm just going to feed 4 pellets straight back in the swim, and I can carry on playing the fish. I'm yet to catch a common. I'm just wondering whether they're all mirrors in this lake. Do you know what I think? I think this is a common. First common of the day. Do you know what? That's an F1. That's a big F1, isn't it? Look at the size of that. Wow. Well, that was worth the wait. I'm going to check this, but I'm convinced that's an F1. is an F1. Fantastic. I've had all mirrors, probably 13, 14 mirrors, best part of £100 of fish already, and I've had that, which is beautiful. F1, fantastic. What a fishery. Let's get him in the net. I'm going to go through the setup for today's session, and basically my pellet waggler setup anyway. The only thing that changes tends to be the float. So to start with the rod, it's a Daiwa Tournament 11-foot waggler rod. Fantastic progressive action, very comfortable handle. The handle's the right length as well, which is nice. So passing it along the body, fishing quickly, catapulting all the time. It's very comfortable. It's in your hand a lot. Like I said, don't use rod rest for this game. So that's the rod, doesn't let me down. It's 11 foot as well. Don't see the need for anything longer for this kind of fishing. If I can't feed my pellets that far, there's no point in me having a rod longer to cast that far. The reel itself is a Daiwa Tournament 3000 reel. I use this reel for pellet waggler fishing because it is much lighter. Like I said, it's in my hand. I'm constantly in and out the water. You know, 20 seconds, that's it. I'm waiting, I'm back in, casting back out. Much lighter. Great gearing on these reels, great winding power, fast drag, great line lay. Couldn't ask for anything more from a reel. The line on the reel itself is Daiwa Hypersensor, £6. 99% of my pellet waggler fishing is done with £6. Daiwa Hypersensor is great. If I leave it, it stays on top. If I whip it, it sinks straight away. Perfect line for the job, very abrasive. Don't see the need for heavier lines unless I'm looking for bigger fish, bigger floats further out. But most of the pellet waggler fishing is done. £6, I'd say, is an optimum strength. Down to the hook length. The hook length itself is 019 Guru N-gauge, Super LWG hook size 12 for today, with a band that comes just off the gape, a hook that never lets me down. I like big loops, to get the, when I change the hook length, I can easily get the hair rig through it. Also, it gives that extra little bit of resistance as that line's falling through the water behind the waggler, drags it up a little bit. So I like that idea as well. And the waggler itself is a Drennan. It's a bit longer, as you can see. It's the same 4 gram as a standard foam float, nearly twice the length. I can just cut it underneath that water. Doesn't dive deep, sits there perfectly, especially when I want to whip that line quickly and leave a bait dragging like I've done today. It's got a standard swivel, which is a pellet waggler swivel, and that's trapped with 4 small super tight Guru line stop. And that's my setup for my pellet waggler fishing. Just started sinking the line and letting it hang, and it's definitely made a difference now that's towing through in them upper layers. Fish have definitely come shallow, 18 inches, but so you've got to fish it shallow, but just whipping that line quickly as that float hits, because I'm hanging only 18 inches deep below the surface, the only movement I'm giving it really is that initial whip of the rod. And that's definitely made a difference, because that float was just tramming through far too quickly, because that wind has just got up and it's blowing more into me now. So it's the way to fish it, and it's probably the way to keep the float as still as possible. God, these fish, they don't muck about in here, do they? Got our make holding it and our make playing it, but well worth it. Gone are the days of the big pellet wagglers, the big pellet wagglers that were 8-10 grams, big discs, big weight in the bottom, that you could just fish anywhere, crash into your peg, fish would come to it, rod would rip around. It's really, everything's changing. If you look on the market now, floats are getting smaller. There's mugging floats, there's more stealth-like foam type floats, 2.5, 3, 4 gram floats. I tend to use 2-3 main types of waggler really. The ones I use the most of are mainly Guru ones, which are the foam ones. These small wagglers, they're great. They cast brilliantly. When you're catching fish in the upper layers, they sit perfectly. And like I say earlier about conditions, the majority of the time we pick this method up is when the weather's very warm, it's very still, and that's when we fish these. The balsa ones cast that bit further. They're a bit heavier. They're 6, 7, sort of 6.5 grams, 7 gram. And these are fantastic for fishing a little bit further out. When it's effortless, you just want to fire it out there. Sometimes you want to go up to 11 mil pellet even for these floats. But I'd say I use them 10% of the time, if that. And then the third float I tend to use, which has been the best float today by far because of the windy conditions and the fact it has skimmed through. It's deep water, but the surface certainly is moving fast, are the crystal type. I've actually fished the 4.5 gram today, which is this one here. It's actually fully loaded. You don't need any shot down the line. Just trap it basically with the line stops. And I've been able to get the line under the water today to actually hang a bait, which has been good. So I've been able to fish a static bait shallow and just keep feeding pellets, 4 pellets at a time. And then the other pellet, the other pellet waggler I nearly went to was the longer version of that, also 4.5 gram, but I haven't had to because I'm fishing so shallow. I just wanted to get away with kind of the stumpiest float I can get away with, where I can keep presentation. Had it got a little bit windy, I probably would have switched to that one. But they're really the main types of pellet wagglers that we go for these days. But as I said, how it's such a revolutionary method that's evolved. Floats have got smaller, they cast well, they sit higher, they're almost indestructible now as well. So they're the main pellet wagglers for the job. When you're putting a pellet in the band, you're not actually putting the pellet on the hook. You don't know when the hook's gone blunt. So make sure you have plenty of these hooks tied. I actually have all my hair rigs ready on the Guru EVA reels, hook retainers. Well worth doing, saves you losing that important fish. So what I'm explaining is originally we were fishing up to 1 metre deep, and even when I shallowed up to 18 inches, the idea is when I cast that float and I feather it, that float's going to lay flat and the pellet's going to fall behind it like so. And most of the bites will come in within the first 10-15 seconds of that falling in an arc. What I've done now is, because the wind's got up and that's towing, when that hits the water that's starting to move. So what I'm doing is I'm just whipping that rod up. So when that goes in and that cocks, I'm whipping the rod up, bringing it towards me maybe 3-4 feet, and then that pellet's sinking and hanging, and then I'm feeding 3-4 pellets constantly. So I've altered it a little bit how it was fishing initially, because it's now got windy and towing, like I said. So I'm gaining the presentation by slowing the float down, by getting that line under the surface, which is against normal pellet waggler fishing. But at the end of the day, if you're putting fish in the net and those fish are only wanting to come shallow as they are today in 8-9 foot of water, then that's what you've got to do to slow the float down at 22 to 25 meters. So again, casting in, feathering this way, pellet falling straight behind, fishing the pellet down in an arc. Most of the bites are coming within that fall, 18 inches. But now what's happening, I'm getting all the bites at 18 inches deep by feeding 3 and 4 pellets at a time, by letting that float hang like so. I'm just going to go through a little bit about maximising that very short window of opportunity. Like I said, we're looking at between 15 and 20 seconds. Some of the bites have come sooner, but if we take an average of say 12 seconds, that's about the time it's taken me to get a bite. So just to run through what I do in the process, and then what we'll do is we'll cast out and just see if I'm about right. So what I do is I swing the waggler out, pellets on, swing it out forward of me, capture the pellet in my hand so I don't have to look away. As I say, you need to have your eyes on the float at all times. Fire out. I'm going to fire out 6 pellets, but in two pulls. So that's 6 pellets. And now the float's ready to cast, purely because it was in front of me and forward of me. So I'm going to cast out, feather that down, bail arm over. The line's not moved, it's taut. Pellet's gone past the float. Now we're counting. I'm counting in my head. And hopefully, there you go. Now I counted 7 seconds, but that just gives you an idea of that short window of the float, from the float hitting, getting in that presentation. Now that wind's lulled a bit, it was a perfect time to kind of judge how long it takes to get a bite. You know, on that pellet waggler shallow, keep feeding 3-4 pellets each time. Got it down here quite quickly, but I've got the drag on, like I said, because what I don't want to do is get that rod flattening out on me, so there's no give, and then, you know, under my feet, especially where it is a bit shallower and there's a lot of reeds, makes a dive for it, then I'm going to lose it. But feels like a good fish. Keep that rod low when they do that. If you keep it low, they tend to go back down like that one did. and if you lift it they tend to come up with their tail and start kicking more and shaking the head. And there you go, look at that, beautiful fish. Oh, double figures. The waggler out of the way and I'll just get it up to share. But this is actually a leather carp. There's no scales on it at all. Oh, there is a few on the top. Yeah, there is a few on the top, but look at that. What a cracker of a fish. And no wonder it put up a fight on the Pellet Waggler shallow. And that was sinking the line for that presentation. And the two biggest fish have come when I've done that today, sinking the line. Just giving it one whip, keeping it under, hanging the bait, flicking 3-4 pellets on the top, catapulting them out, resulting in another nice fish like that. Well, there we have it. We've come to the end of today's session, and what a session it's been. You know, it's been a great session in certainly less than ideal conditions. But Pellet Waggler is one of those methods that we tend to build up as the day goes on. You know, we tend to build it up, the weather gets, the sun comes out, you know, and the water warms up as the day kind of progresses. So it's been a fantastic session, and probably in the first 2 hours of fishing I've had way over 100 pounds. We've fished for 4 hours, so you can only imagine what kind of a weight we'd had if we put everything in the net. We haven't put them in the net, we've just retained some of the bigger fish. So it goes to show how deadly the Pellet Waggler is, even in less than ideal conditions. Now, what I've done as an added bonus, I've also going to do an extra video, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a rod from scratch on how I've set the rod up. I'm going to rate it in a kind of a difficulty, moderately difficult or easy, and I'm going to do that and click on the link in this video and you'll be able to watch that as a separate video. I'm going to do that for every video so we can put the rod set up and everything else I've done to, you know, what rod and tackle I've utilised for that session I've been on. So in today's session, it's been Pellet Waggler. I'm going to set that up from scratch for you. So let's get some of the bigger fish out to show you what I've caught today, and thanks very much for watching. Well, what a great net of fish and what a great day. Fantastic fishery. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. Well, let's get them back because they're lively.